For over a century, Harley-Davidson has been the actual sound of the open road, the one brand tattooed on more arms than any other company on planet Earth. It's freedom on two wheels. It's about as American as a machine can get. So how did this legend, this rolling symbol of rebellion, end up owned by a company whose biggest claim to fame was the machine that resets the pins at your local bowling alley? And I don't just mean owned by them, I mean nearly driven into the ground by them. For 12 years, from 1969 to 1981, the Harley-Davidson you know did not belong to the Harleys or the Davidsons. It belonged to a corporate conglomerate called American Machine and Foundry. And in those 12 years, they took one of the most respected names in all of motorcycling and turned it into a running joke. The bikes leaked oil onto showroom floors. They shipped with parts missing from the crate. Dealers had to repair brand new motorcycles before they could even sell them. The joke going around the industry was that if you bought a Harley, you'd better buy two, because one of them was always going to be sitting in the shop. This is the story of how a bowling company almost killed Harley-Davidson, and how 13 people risked everything to drag it back from the edge at the last possible second. To get why this was even possible, you have to see just how high up the mountain Harley was sitting before the fall. Harley-Davidson started in a tiny wooden shed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1903. A young man named William Harley and his childhood friends, the Davidson brothers, built their first motorcycle by hand, with the company name reportedly scrawled on the door. From that shed, they built something that would outlast almost everyone. Over the next few decades, Harley became the definition of what a motorcycle was supposed to be in America. Big, loud, built like a tank. When America went to war in World War II, Harley churned out around 90,000 military motorcycles, mostly the WLA and its related WLC variant, and soldiers nicknamed the WLA the Liberator. It cemented Harley's image as tough, no-nonsense American iron you could trust with your life. And then Harley got the ultimate gift. Its greatest rival simply died. For decades, two great American companies have been locked in a fierce rivalry, Harley-Davidson and Indian. But Indian stumbled through the post-war years, made a string of bad decisions, and in 1953, the original Indian motorcycle company collapsed and stopped building bikes. Just like that, Harley was the last major American motorcycle maker standing. For all practical purposes, it was the American motorcycle industry. The whole road belonged to them, which is exactly the kind of king-of-the-hill confidence that makes a company stop paying attention. And in 1959, a small Japanese company walked into America and flipped the entire industry upside down. The company was Honda. And here's the genius of what they did. They didn't come swinging at Harley head-on. They came in way underneath it. Honda sold tiny, cheap, incredibly reliable little motorcycles, wrapped in a friendly advertising campaign that ran in the early 1960s. You meet the nicest people on a Honda. No leather jackets, no outlaw mystique, just clean, cheerful, affordable bikes that started every time you pushed the button and did not dump oil all over your garage floor. And it worked like magic. Suburban families bought them. College kids bought them. People who had never pictured themselves as motorcycle people bought them. And Harley, up on its throne, basically laughed the whole thing off. The attitude in Milwaukee was, come on, those little things aren't real motorcycles. Nobody serious is ever going to ride a Honda. That was a mistake they would spend the next 20 years bleeding for. Because Honda was never trying to be Harley. Honda was expanding the entire market, pulling in millions of brand new riders, then patiently walking them up the ladder into bigger and bigger machines. And Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki came pouring in right behind them, running the same playbook. And in 1969, the exact same year our bowling company enters the story, Honda dropped a machine that changed motorcycling forever. The Honda CB750. People often call it the first true superbike, and it earned that title. A smooth, powerful four-cylinder engine that revved like a sports car, an electric starter that just worked, and a hydraulic front disc brake, which on a mass-produced motorcycle in 1969 was borderline exotic. It was fast, refined, reliable, and it sold for right around $1,500. You could buy a machine that outran and outbraked almost anything Harley made for less money, and it wouldn't leave a puddle under it. A few years later, Kawasaki dropped the Z1, a 903 cubic centimeter monster with a screaming double overhead cam 4 that was even more powerful. On raw engineering, the Japanese had blown right past America's answer to motorcycles. So while all of that was raging on the horizon, Harley had a much quieter, much bigger problem festering at home. The company was getting old. The tooling was old. The methods were old, barely changed in decades. And the founding families were aging out. The men steering the company knew they needed a massive injection of cash to modernize the plants and fight off the Japanese wave building into a tsunami. They needed money, a lot of it. And in the go-go corporate world of the late 1960s, there was one very specific type of buyer sitting on giant piles of cash and itching to spend it, the conglomerate. And this is where our unlikely main character walks through the door. To judge what happened to Harley, you've got to understand who American Machine and Foundry actually was. AMF was a giant. In the 1960s, the conglomerate was the hottest business model on Wall Street. The idea was simple. One big parent corporation buys up a bunch of totally unrelated businesses and runs them all under one roof. Diversification. And AMF was a champion of the strategy. They were massive in bowling. That automatic pin setter at the end of your lane, for millions of Americans, that was an AMF machine. They also made tobacco machinery, bakery equipment, tennis rackets, golf gear, snow skis, garden tractors, and, this is not a joke, they even had a hand in building components for nuclear reactors. Bowling pins to atomic energy, all under one umbrella. The man running the show was AMF's chairman Rodney Gott. And Gott matters here because he had a genuine soft spot for what came next. He was a motorcycle guy. He actually loved Harley-Davidson. So when the chance came up to add the most legendary motorcycle name in America to AMF's collection, it made a certain kind of sense, at least on paper. Motorcycles were a leisure product. AMF was a leisure empire. Harley had a priceless name but was starving for capital. On a spreadsheet, it looked like a perfect match. The only problem with spreadsheets is that they have never once built a motorcycle. And AMF wasn't the only shark circling. There was a rival bidder, another conglomerate called Bangor Punta, and for a nervous stretch it looked like Harley might end up with them. This turned into a corporate tug of war, and Harley leadership had a strong opinion. They did not want Bangor Punta, which had a reputation for buying companies, stripping them for parts, and leaving the carcass behind. AMF, led by the motorcycle-loving Rodney Gott, seemed like the far friendlier, safer partner. So in 1969, the deal went through. AMF acquired Harley-Davidson in a stock swap valued at roughly $21 million. The founding families and shareholders received AMF stock. A lot of them became wealthy essentially overnight, and the most iconic name in American motorcycling officially became a division of a bowling and leisure conglomerate. At the signing, everybody was smiling. From the outside, it looked like a happy ending for everybody involved. It was instead the opening scene of the worst chapter in the company's history. And here's what makes this so painful to look back on. AMF did not buy Harley to strangle it. They bought it because they believed in it. And the very first thing they wanted to do was grow the business, sell more motorcycles, make more money. That good intention is the exact thing that almost destroyed the company. Because AMF saw a brand that couldn't build enough bikes to meet demand, and they made a decision that sounds sensible in a boardroom and turns out to be a catastrophe on a factory floor. They decided to massively crank up production. In the years right after the takeover, AMF pushed Harley to ramp up output dramatically, chasing tens of thousands more machines a year and eventually pushing toward the 50,000 range. The problem was the pace. They wanted it fast, far faster than Harley's aging factories and quality systems could possibly keep up with. To even attempt it, AMF made a fateful structural change. They split Harley's manufacturing across two locations, hundreds of miles apart. Engines and transmissions stayed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the company had lived since day one. But final assembly, the part where you actually bolt the whole motorcycle together, moved to a facility in York, Pennsylvania, where AMF already owned property. On a logistics map, it looked reasonable. In reality, the coordination was a nightmare. Parts didn't show up when they were supposed to. Quality control between the two sites disintegrated, and the relentless pressure to hit those quotas meant one thing became the only thing that mattered: speed. Not fit, not finish, not whether the motorcycle actually ran when it left the building, just hit the number. And you can probably guess where this is heading. Somehow, it's even worse than you're picturing. The motorcycles that came off the AMF era line became legendary, just not in any of the ways the company wanted. The quality didn't gently slip, it fell straight off a cliff. They leaked oil. This became almost the defining trait of the era. You'd park a brand new Harley on the showroom floor and come back to find a spreading puddle underneath it. Dealers literally kept drip pans stashed under the bikes to catch it. Just imagine selling somebody on the pride and prestige of a Harley-Davidson while there's an oil stain creeping across your polished showroom tile right beneath the thing. But the leaks were just the opening act. Bikes came through with faulty welds, with electrical systems that failed randomly, with parts installed loose, installed wrong, or in some cases straight up missing. There are stories from this period of motorcycles arriving at dealerships essentially incomplete, missing components that were supposed to be bolted on at the factory, sometimes with those parts just tossed loosely in a box in the crate. Vibration on some machines got so bad that bolts would work themselves loose and pieces would rattle right off the bike while you were riding. I mean, think about that for a second. You're the dealer. You paid the factory good money for a finished, ready-to-sell motorcycle. And what shows up is basically a very expensive half-built kit that you now have to finish and repair yourself on your own dime before you can put it in front of a single paying customer. This is the era where a phrase burned itself into motorcycle culture: the Harley Hangover. The idea that owning one of these bikes meant a constant, expensive relationship with your mechanic and your toolbox. That joke about buying two Harleys, one to ride and one for parts, was told constantly, because the second one would always be torn apart, keeping the first one alive. For a certain breed of die-hard loyalist, it became a twisted badge of honor. Real riders fix their own bikes, right? But for everybody else, for the mainstream buyer AMF was so desperate to reach, it was a disaster. Because right across the street, the Honda dealership was quietly selling motorcycles that just worked. That frustration on the factory floor was building toward a breaking point. But before we get to the explosion, let's talk about the bikes themselves. Because the AMF era wasn't all disaster, and this next part surprises people. If you're finding this story as wild as I do, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button, because I dig into corporate disasters and comebacks like this every single week. All right, back to the bikes. Because some genuinely great motorcycles were designed during the AMF years, and the man behind most of them is one of the real heroes of this story. His name is Willie G. Davidson, grandson of one of the original founders, and Harley's vice president of styling. Even while everything around him was falling apart, Willie G. Davidson was quietly cooking up designs that would eventually save Harley's soul. In 1971, he gave the world the FX Superglide, and this bike is a bigger deal than it sounds. Willie G. Davidson took the big frame and engine from Harley's touring bikes and blended it with the lighter front end from the sporty Sportster line, creating a stripped-down, custom-looking machine straight from the factory. It's widely credited as the first true factory custom. Harley basically looked at what riders were doing in their garages, chopping and customizing their bikes, and said, "What if we just built the cool version for you?" That single idea invented the entire modern cruiser category Harley would dominate for the next 40 years. born in the middle of the AMF mess. In 1977, he followed it up with the FXS Lowrider, and it was a hit. And that same year, he swung for the fences with something completely different, the XLCR Cafe Racer, a lean, aggressive, all-black sport bike meant to fight the fast machines from Japan and Europe. And here's the beautiful irony. When it came out, it was a total flop. Traditional Harley buyers said, "That's not a Harley." The sport bike crowd said, "Why buy that when I can get a faster Japanese machine?" It landed in the gap between two audiences and pleased almost nobody. It sold poorly and was quietly discontinued. But today the XLCR is a rare, sought-after, valuable classic, worth far more than it ever sold for new. A commercial failure that aged into a cult legend, which is kind of the whole AMF era in one motorcycle. There's even a subplot almost nobody knows. Some of the smaller bikes wearing the Harley name in this period weren't built in America at all. They were built in Italy. Back in 1960, Harley bought a 50% stake in the motorcycle division of an Italian company called Ermacchi and sold small, lightweight Italian-built bikes under the Harley badge. And get this, those Ermacchi Harley race bikes, ridden by an Italian named Walter Villa, actually won multiple road racing world championships in the mid-1970s. So while American-built Harleys were leaking oil and getting laughed at, Italian-built Harleys were winning world titles. That's how split personality this era really was. But no amount of clever design could paper over the ROT at the core. And that frustration on the American factory floor finally boiled over. The relationship between AMF and the workforce got worse and worse through the 1970s. The pressure to produce, the sense that corporate did not understand the product, the feeling that decisions were being made by people who had never turned a wrench, all of it created a toxic atmosphere. And in 1974, it erupted into a major strike. The workers walked out. Production, already chaotic, ground down further. And there were rumors during this stretch, one of the darker legends of the AMF years, that some of the quality problems were not just accidents of speed. Whispers of deliberate sabotage, disgruntled workers letting defects slip through on purpose. Now, how much of that was real versus industry gossip is genuinely hard to nail down, and I'll be straight with you that it lives more in legend than proven fact. But the telling part is this. The fact that people so readily believed Harley workers might be sabotaging their own bikes tells you everything about how broken the operation had become. And then there was the badge. This one tiny detail might capture the whole era better than anything else. During these years, AMF put its own name right on the motorcycles. The bikes carried AMF Harley-Davidson branding. So the most sacred tank badge in all of motorcycling now had to share space with the logo of a bowling conglomerate. For the die-hard faithful, this felt like sacrilege. Their symbol of rebellion, now stamped with the name of the company that made the pinsetter at the bowling alley. That badge became visual shorthand for everything that had gone wrong. While Harley tore itself apart from the inside, the enemy at the gates was only getting hungrier. Remember those little Honda bikes Harley laughed off in 1959? By the mid-1970s, nobody was laughing. The Japanese had pulled off exactly the long game Harley failed to see coming. They had used those cheap, reliable small bikes to build enormous loyal customer bases and efficient manufacturing scale. And then they climbed the ladder right into the heart of Harley's territory. On performance, reliability, and manufacturing efficiency, the Japanese had opened a huge gap, and they could often sell those machines for less money because their modern factories ran circles around Harley's aging plants. The result was brutal. Harley's share of its own home market cratered. In the big heavyweight category Harley had once completely owned, the Japanese moved in and took over enormous chunks. There were stretches where Harley's slice of the American heavyweight market fell to a small fraction of what it had once been. The company that had once literally been the American motorcycle industry was now watching foreign competitors slice it up for parts, while its own bikes leaked oil onto the showroom floor. If that sounds like the bottom, keep watching because the story is about to turn. And it turns because of one man who looked at this smoking wreck and saw something almost nobody else could. His name was Vaughn Beals. AMF had brought him in to lead the Harley division, and Beals was cut from different cloth than the corporate managers before him. He got it. He understood what Harley meant to people and what it could become again if somebody actually fixed it. Beals became famous for his hands-on approach to the quality nightmare, personally riding the finished bikes coming off the line, feeling the defects rattling underneath him. He knew this reputation for junk reliability was not just an embarrassment, it was an existential threat. If Harley could not build a bike that simply worked, no amount of heritage or thunder was going to save it. So Beals pushed hard for quality improvements, even under AMF. But he kept slamming into the same wall. Harley was a small, struggling piece of a giant conglomerate that increasingly wanted nothing to do with the headache. And then, right around 1980, AMF made the decision that cracked the door wide open. It signaled it wanted out of the motorcycle business entirely. Harley-Davidson was for sale, again. Except this time, the person eyeing it wasn't another faceless conglomerate. Vaughn Beals had an audacious, borderline crazy idea. What if the people who actually ran Harley-Davidson, the people who loved these motorcycles, bought the company themselves and put its fate back in the hands of actual motorcycle people? It was a high-wire idea. Harley was a mess. Its reputation was in the gutter. The Japanese were dominant. Buying it meant taking on enormous risk to rescue a business a lot of outsiders assumed was already dead. Beals didn't flinch. He gathered a group of 13 senior Harley executives who believed in the company enough to put their own money and reputations on the line. And right there among them was Willie G. Davidson, the grandson of the founder, the living link back to that little wooden shed in 1903. For Willie G., this wasn't a business transaction. This was his family's name hanging in the balance. They pulled it off through a leveraged buyout. In plain English, they borrowed an enormous mountain of money, using the company itself as collateral. These 13 men put up their own money and tied their careers and their names to a deal loaded with debt. If Harley failed now, they'd be going down with a company that owed far more than it was worth. In June of 1981, the deal closed. The 13 bought Harley-Davidson back from AMF for a sum right around $81 million, most of it borrowed. After 12 long years, the bowling company was out. Harley-Davidson belonged to Harley people again, and they had a slogan ready, one that still gives longtime fans goosebumps. The Eagle Soars Alone. To celebrate, a group of them rode together between the two plants, York and Milwaukee, symbolically reconnecting the two halves of the company AMF had split apart. It was a beautiful, triumphant moment. It was also, in a very real sense, the exact moment the company was in the greatest danger it had ever faced. Because here's the cold water reality the 13 woke up to the morning after. They now owned Harley-Davidson, yes, but they also owned every one of its problems, and now they were on the hook for all of them. The bikes still had quality issues, the reputation was still in the gutter, the Japanese were still crushing them, and they were now buried under a mountain of buyout debt. And the timing could not have been worse. Interest rates in the early 1980s were some of the most brutal in American history, and a nasty recession slammed into the country right as they took the wheel. So 13 guys had bet everything on a half-dead company and immediately walked into a recession, sky-high interest rates, crushing debt, a ruined reputation, and superior foreign competition. The company came dangerously close to going completely under, and it got worse. By the mid-1980s, the situation had spiraled to the brink. The lead bank that had helped finance the buyout decided it wanted out and moved to pull its financing. And when the biggest bank backing you walks away from a company drowning in debt, that's very often the exact moment the lights go out for good. By some accounts, Harley-Davidson came within a whisker of filing for bankruptcy in this stretch. What saved them was a frantic last-ditch scramble for new financing. A different finance company, Heller Financial, stepped in and agreed to back the company when the original lender bailed, and that lifeline, secured in the nick of time, kept Harley breathing. The company that today sells motorcycles to millionaires and movie stars was, in the mid-1980s, one bank meeting away from being liquidated for scrap. That's how close this came. If Beals and the other 12 had thrown in the towel right there, this would be a very different story. A sad cautionary tale about pride and a doomed rescue. They did not walk away. And what they did next is the entire reason you can still walk into a dealership and buy a brand new Harley today. The turnaround happened on two fronts. The first was inside the factory. Freed from AMF's obsession with raw volume, the new owners went all in on fixing the actual product. And they did something that took real humility. They studied the enemy. They looked hard at how the Japanese, and Honda in particular, built motorcycles so reliably and efficiently. Harley leaders famously toured a Honda plant on American soil and came away stunned. And instead of sulking, they copied the best of it, just-in-time inventory, so you don't drown the factory in stockpiled parts. employee involvement, putting pride and problem-solving power back in the hands of the workers on the line, and statistical methods to actually catch and control defects. This became known inside the company as the productivity triad, and slowly, grindingly, it started to work. The oil leaks got fixed, defect rates came down. A Harley started to become a machine you could actually trust to get you home. They also got smart about the one thing AMF never understood: the community. In 1983, the company launched the Harley Owners Group, better known as HOG, turning Harley ownership into a club, a lifestyle, a brotherhood rather than just a purchase. It grew into one of the biggest factory-sponsored rider groups in the world and locked in exactly the fierce tribal loyalty that had always been Harley's real secret weapon. And in 1984, they rolled out a brand new engine, the V2 Evolution, nicknamed Evo. It kept the classic Harley look and rumble, but it was dramatically more reliable, ran cooler, and, praise be, actually kept its oil on the inside where oil belongs. The second front was fought in Washington. In 1983, Harley-Davidson did something controversial. It petitioned the US government for temporary protection from motorcycle imports, arguing the Japanese were flooding the market with heavyweight bikes and stockpiling huge inventories in a way that was strangling what was left of the domestic industry. And President Ronald Reagan agreed. He imposed steep new tariffs on large imported motorcycles, the heavyweight machines with engines of 700 cubic centimeters and up, aimed squarely at the Japanese competition. The tariff started high, reportedly around an additional 45% in the first year, and was designed to step down over a 5-year window. The idea was to give Harley breathing room to get its house in order. And here's the remarkable part: it worked. Harley used that breathing room for exactly what it was intended for. The quality improvements took hold, trust came back, sales recovered. And then, in 1987, Harley did something almost unheard of in American business. It went back to the government and asked for the protective tariffs to be lifted early, before they were even set to expire. They were saying, in effect, "Thank you, but we're good now. We can compete on our own." It was a chest-out statement of confidence that turned into a genuine piece of American business legend, and it was backed by proof. In 1986, Harley returned to the public stock market, selling shares for the first time in years, a milestone that helped pay down that crushing buyout debt. From staring down total collapse to a triumphant public comeback in roughly 5 years. So let's circle back to where we started. That most American machine you pictured at the very beginning. The Chrome, the Thunder, the Eagle on the tank. That machine only still exists because of everything you just heard. For 12 years, a bowling company owned Harley-Davidson, and with nothing but good intentions and terrible execution, nearly ran the whole legend into its grave. They cranked the production, gutted the quality, split the factory in half, watched the Japanese devour the market, and stamped their own bowling alley logo onto the sacred tank. And then 13 people who actually loved these motorcycles put their own money and reputations on the line to buy it back and drag it out of the dirt. AMF thought it was buying a leisure product, a prestige brand to sit on the shelf next to the tennis rackets. What it never grasped was that Harley-Davidson was never really about the machine at all. It was about the people who believed in it. AMF had the factory, the brand, the money, and the good intentions. What it never had was that belief. And in the end, that belief is the only thing that saved it. The Eagle soars alone, and after absolutely everything, it's still flying. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the wildest chapters in motorcycle history, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button, because there are a whole lot more stories exactly like this one coming. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Would you actually ride an AMF-era Harley badge and oil leaks and all? Or does that puddle spreading across the showroom floor tell you everything you need to know? Let me know, and I'll catch you in the next one.